Hello, everybody. Hey, it's Steve Van Tassel and Jay Pounds here for the Dynasty Owner podcast. Um, we're just here. One of the first times we're doing an actual podcast as opposed to videos. So Jay and I thought we'd get together and talk about a bunch of topics. How's it going, Jay?
It's going good. How you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good. So, just to let folks know, if you're new to this, I'm Steve Van Tassel. I am a writer for Dynasty Owner. We'll talk about Dynasty Owner in a second. You can follow me on Twitter at SteveVT33, and I'm here with Jay Pounds. What's your info, Jay?
It's at J Pounds NFL.
Okay. Yeah. And so we'll be here. Just so folks know, we're going to talk about Dynasty Owner because both of us are writers for Dynasty Owner and big players on Dynasty Owner. And Dynasty Owner is a little different than your regular Dynasty fantasy football league. And there's a couple of main things that are the difference. While we're a traditional Dynasty league where you hold players and keep them on, the major thing that differentiates us from a regular Dynasty league is that we use real NFL contracts and salaries. Dynasty Owner actually has some patents on these things. So like we're the only game that's allowed to use real NFL contracts unless the NFL lets people know the contracts. So pretty much if you play Dynasty Owner, we're the closest thing to being a real NFL GM as pretty much most of us are ever going to get to. So, which is a lot of fun. It makes it a lot different than a regular Dynasty league, right, Jay?
Oh, it's completely different. Like you and Tim were talking about on the live stream yesterday. Nobody's going to drop Tyler Lockett in a regular Dynasty league, but I bet you a lot of people drop Tyler Lockett in Dynasty Owner come this season with that contract increase he gets.
Yeah, and the other part of it is while we have salaries, you just can't have as much salary as you want. We're like the NFL and we have a salary cap, and the Dynasty Owner salary cap is tied to the NFL salary cap. So it's going to be 70% of the NFL cap, whatever the NFL cap is. This past year, it was 115.75, was it? What was it, 125?
127.
127.75, that's right. And next year, it's supposed to go up to about 145, depending on what the NFL cap is. But basically, whatever the NFL cap is, we're 70% of that. Another thing that's different about Dynasty Owner, which I think is great and a lot of fun, is we have bench scoring. And by that, we have three. You have a starting lineup, you have a bench, and then you have a practice squad. Players in your starting lineup, which is traditional quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and a kicker. You get full points from them. And we have different scoring rules, which are we can go over. You can talk about later. You can look on dynastyowner.com for those. But then we also have a bench, which has all the same positions except for no flex. And you get 25% of the points from your players who scored by the players on your bench added to your final total. So it rewards having a very deep team. Sometimes you've got tough decisions to make in terms of starters and bench. And so you would get points for those guys if you put them on the bench. And we also have practice squads, but you don't get points for guys if you leave them on your practice squad. So I'm sure there's been plenty of games where I've won or lost because of bench scoring,
Yeah, I've looked around and just to make that point, because I like to emphasize it a little bit here and there throughout the season of my articles, and there's a lot of people that lose because of their bench. It's unbelievable actually how many people lose because of that.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to talk about, and you may have heard this before, is we have what's called the Chase for the Ring, and that is basically we have a platform-wide contest. So everybody who plays Dynasty Owner, you have your own 12-team league, and everybody has a league champion. But all the league champions are put together, and then the league champion with the most points overall wins a Super Bowl style ring. It's got diamonds and rubies. It's very nice. You could go check it out if you go to check Dynasty Owner. Check it out online, dynastyowner.com, or follow Dynasty_owner on Twitter. You can see that. But basically, they give out a ring and you get awarded. We've had 2 winners already. We just had a 3rd winner. He hasn't got his ring yet. But I mean, and the key thing is you have to win your league in order to qualify to be the Chase for the Ring winner, which is difficult because sometimes you have a great team and all of a sudden you lose in the playoffs and you're not eligible for the ring. So it's sort of as a couple of the winners have said, it's kind of a validation of the fact that they thought they were pretty good at fantasy football, but that was a real validation for it. So neither Jay or I have won the ring yet, unfortunately, but it's only been 3 years. So we got a few more to try, a few more chances, right, Jay?
Yep, that's the greatest prize in fantasy football, in my opinion. And they also get flown out to the Hall of Fame and all that stuff too, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they get a limo trip and flown out to Hall of Fame. They'll get their ring. It's very cool. I haven't done it, but I mean, because we've been in the pandemic for a while. But I mean, I'm sure it's very fun to go to the Hall of Fame there. And I think they get, they know they might know the Hall of Fame guys a little bit. So I think they get special stuff. So that's pretty cool. So, so that's a little bit about Dynasty Owner, just so people who aren't familiar know. If you guys are Dynasty owners and listening to us, you probably know all that stuff. But but now we're recording this. It's late February, and it's kind of a dead time in the NFL. I mean, about the only thing, the Super Bowl was a couple of weeks ago. About the only thing going on is that teams can start putting their franchise tag on players, but nobody does that right away in the first couple of days. They give them 2 weeks to do it, and almost all the teams pretty much take to like the last day generally. But there are things that you can do to prep for the upcoming Dynasty Owner season. If you already have a team, you can start tinkering with your team. If you're doing startups, you can start to check out some things. And we got a list of some of these things here. The first thing you can do, especially if you have an established team, is you can go check out the market values or expected contracts for NFL free agents. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but basically it's good to know like what salaries already are out there, who's making a lot, who's making a little. You might know some of that because if you follow the NFL a little bit, but you might not know all the players and what they make and how much, how long their contract is. And so it's different because, if you play regular Dynasty or redraft, you don't really care. I mean, does it really matter who makes them? If the guy makes $1 million or $3 million? Not really, but in Dynasty Owner, it matters a lot. So there's plenty of tools and places to check that out. We write articles that do that. When you sign up for Dynasty Owner, you can start mock drafting, and we have the salaries and contracts in there. But for free agents, obviously their contract isn't known yet. You can look at their past contract, but you should start checking out market values and what people think they're going to get and everything. So the second thing is, especially if you're a new Dynasty Owner, I think is to go do a Dynasty Owner mock draft, because you're going to see differences there. You can look at your regular fantasy league ADP, or you can look at ADPs on all the other sites that you might use, but Dynasty Owner ADP is different. And that's because of the salaries and the contracts. Jonathan Taylor is great, and he was the number one pick overall last year for Dynasty Owner, where he probably wasn't in your regular Dynasty League. I can't remember where he probably went in a regular Dynasty League, but in Dynasty Owner, because his contract's under $2 million and he was expected to be great, he was then flying off the boards at number one consistently in most leagues. So,
yeah, you think about it too, like somebody like Davonte Adams even at $14.5 million, I'm pretty sure that's what he was at last season.
Yeah,
he was still going probably top 3 rounds, no problem. Now he's going to be at 25, 26 million. You're going to start seeing him going round 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 in the startup draft because of how high that salary is. Even though he's the wide receiver 2 of Dynasty Owner last year, he's going to move back quite a bit once he gets this raise. I mean, you look at where DeAndre Hopkins was going, it'll probably be roughly the same range where Davonte Adams goes this season.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at something simple like quarterbacks, the first quarterback in Dynasty Owner last year overall on terms of ADP was Justin Herbert, because he's on his rookie deal and it's under $7 million a year. Whereas, in most Dynasty leagues, I would think that Patrick Mahomes was probably the number one pick, but his salary is $45 million. He's the most expensive player on the Dynasty Owner platform, and so he goes later because if he doesn't play well or he gets hurt, you can have less money to spend on the rest of the players around him on a team, kind of just like the NFL. If you're paying Mahomes $45 million, the rest of the team doesn't get as much money. So Dynasty Owner is the same way. So it changes the ADP, which is good to know and prepare for as you're going into your first dynasty owner draft, or even if you're doing your second or third, it's always different. They're different. It's just different than your regular fantasy league. The third thing I was going to wanted to mention was like, I don't personally, and maybe Jay's different on this, but I don't worry much about rookies right now. I want to know about the rookies and, who's supposed to be good and not good. But I mean, I think landing spot matters in Dynasty Owner more than other places because you do have to factor that salary. And say you've got two wide receivers and you like both of them, they're about the same and things like that. Well, if one guy goes with the 15th pick and makes like $4.5 million a year, and the other guy goes with the 28th pick and is making like $3 million a year, well, all of a sudden you might like that $3 million guy a little bit better because you think the talent's there for both of them and, it's less salary. So that's what makes it different. So in a way, I don't focus as much attention on rookies now as probably other people do in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I'll look at them. I'm familiar with the names and stuff at this point, but I really start digging in right around, lead up to draft, probably right around free agency of the NFL is when I really start digging into the rookies and just kind of getting familiar with them. That way I have my favorites, and then after landing spot, I can really kind of set my list and rankings how I like.
Yeah. And our rookie mock, we do have, if you're in an established league, we do have rookie mock drafts, and those the NFL drafts at the end of April. The rookie mock drafts start. The rookie drafts start at the end of May. I forget the exact date, but you can start mock drafting rookies right now. Obviously, we don't have salaries on the platform, so everybody's kind of at $1 million salary. But it just gives you a feel on how the rookies are going to go, what people are thinking about them. But then again, if you do like to follow rookie, I would say if you do like to follow rookies and you have a lot of picks in your dynasty owner draft, or maybe you just like to build with rookies if you're going to do a new team, you can kind of find out if you hunt around. There is the rookie salary scale. We all know that those rookies get slotted into spots. And so what you can do is you can project like their future contract. If if Drake London's, I was just reading about him. He's supposed to be a first round draft pick. And they're saying on the lower end. Well, you can look at what some of those lower end first round picks made, like Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney. Then you'll have a rough idea of about what his contract's going to be, because he's probably not going to be a top 5-10 pick like Jalen Waddle or Jamar Chase were last year, and making around $7 million a year. So if you're really into rookies, you can still do that. You just still do that, but you just have to do I feel like you have to do a little more research, because you just have to kind of guess. Landing spot matters in rookies, obviously, but it matters more in dynasty owner just because, of the salary. Every slot's different. Every spot that a player drops is less salary that you have to pay them from your dynasty owner budget, right?
Yep, and you can't be mad about a savings. That's the name of dynasty, or the name of dynasty owner. Just
Actually,
try to have cap space.
Dynasty owners don't matter too much if a guy drops to the second round, if they really like somebody, because honestly, you're like, yeah, drop. I get you cheaper.
It's a reward for us.
Go for instead of being a late first round pick, be a high second round pick. That's $1 million. That's like $1 million last year, man. Come on.
And if you think about it, it's how an actual NFL GM thinks too. They want the guys they love to drop, and that's how we feel as well.
Yeah, exactly. They're happy. I mean, if they think they have a first round talent and he's available early in the second round, they might trade up and get him. But they're happy because all of a sudden they're paying him a couple $1 million less, and that could be a free agent. That could be not that we have these players, but I mean that could be like an offensive tackle to like help guard your quarterback. So that's a lot of fun, but I mean, that's something you can do to prep for dynasty owner for like next year, or if you're new. The other thing, and this is a little bit of a plug for Jay and I, but we've done articles. Jay does a lot of rebuilding articles. So like if you've got a team that for example, you can buy a team. Like if you want an established team already on Dynasty, there's an orphan store for teams that people just have abandoned. And then there's a for sale by owner spot where you could buy a team. And you might get a cheap team that's not so great. And Jay does a lot of articles about rebuilding. So you can read those old articles or the current articles that he's doing and find out what's the best way to go about rebuilding your dynasty owner team, because it's different than rebuilding a regular dynasty team, right, Jay?
Oh yeah, it's a way different. I mean, just the free agency alone will make everything completely different for you. It's you got players like Nick Chubb, DJ Moore, all these guys getting extremely big pay raises from compared to what they were making, and it just makes things so much different. I tried to when I'm doing these articles, I've been trying to kind of include our users teams on it just to give everybody kind of a different viewpoint on different rosters because I've from just doing mine and Brian Peck's team, I told him to trade DJ Moore and I'm keeping DJ Moore. So it's very dependent on your roster and how things are set up and stuff like that.
Yeah, and your salary cap situation, because obviously if you think DJ Moore is good, if you're, if you want to keep him as a building block on your regular dynasty team, it doesn't matter if he makes 11 million or 2 million. You're going to keep him. But if that $8 million difference might be the difference between trade in dynasty or between keeping him and trading him.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I found it was. He was a little closer to the cap than I was, and he had a couple of better players than I did, and DJ Moore became expendable at that point, and it's just, I mean, I guess you can find those kind of scenarios in regular leagues, but it's just you'll understand what I mean when you start rebuilding a team. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. It's just there's a whole different feel to everything, and you're looking for bad contracts to take on to trade. For instance, I traded Amari Cooper away this past season and DeAndre Hopkins, huge contracts. They're going to be tough to trade, but you have to get creative and find a way to get picks out of them if you're rebuilding. Otherwise, you're just going to either amnesty them or pay a bunch of dynasty dollars to cut them, and it's just what makes dynasty owner a lot different than any league I've been in before.
Yeah, and Jay's talked about amnesty provision. What that is, just for folks who might not be familiar, is you can buy one, you get one when you join. You can buy one for $5 million, and basically it's kind of like a get out of jail free card. So if you've got a bad contract and you don't want that guy anymore, it's like what they used to do in the NBA. You can just cut him and get rid of that contract for free. You just use your amnesty provision. Now you're limited on how many of them you can use and how many of them you can buy, but it does help if you need to kind of get rid of a guy. Otherwise, the only way when you drop them is you have to pay 25% of their remaining salary. And by salary, we mean like the whole contract. So if you've got a guy who's got a 4-year contract for $2 million and you want to get rid of him, that's $8 million total. That means you have to pay $2 million dynasty dollars to get rid of him. And you get $10 million dynasty dollars to start, plus that amnesty provision. So you can see where if you start cutting and adding players and you have to bid on players using dynasty dollars too. So you can see where it can start to get a little bit expensive. It's not your typical league where everybody's got that one guy who just he's on the waiver wire at 9 a.m. bidding on players and grabbing everybody who had a great week the week before suddenly is on his team the next week, and he drops all the guys who didn't do well. And then in my league that guy never wins, but sometimes they do. But and I feel like Dynasty Owner does a little bit of less of you can't really buy your way to a title because it's harder to when you have to pay for all the drops and all the ads and keep it under a salary cap. You just can't willy-nilly grab these guys. You've got to make sure they fit.
And another thing with the amnesty, I used it on Russell Wilson this season. He broke his finger. I had nowhere. That's another thing with Dynasty Owner. When your quarterback goes down, your $30 million quarterback, you have no way to replace him outside of cut him.
It's like a real NFL
There's just no possible way you can fit another one, a free agent quarterback, under your salary cap. You have to just flat out cut him or amnesty him, and that's what I had to do with Russell Wilson. I ended up having to roll with a combination of Derek Carr and Taysom Hill after that. It wasn't pretty, but it's what I had to do, and that's what another thing that makes Dynasty Owner so much fun. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. But it's not as confusing as you'd think it would be. When I first looked at it, I was like, "Oh, that's a lot." And then as I kind of got going, I'm like, "Oh, this isn't bad at all. This is quite fun." And now it's just pretty much all I want to play anymore.
Yeah, it just adds the other the layer of the contracts. I mean, you're making those decisions anyways in any fantasy football, in any fantasy league. You're making those decisions. What Dynasty Owner adds is just that element of the contracts that you have to pay attention to and keep under the salary cap. And, and then there's strategy with the salary cap. I mean, you've got people who, whatever the salary cap is, they're going to be right up against it. They're going to go as close as they can without going over. And then you've got other folks who they'll hang back a couple $1 million so they can grab somebody here and there and have room and not have to cut a player. Because when we draft 25 players, but you can add up to 30. So if you have some room, you can kind of add a guy here and there who might have a good first week of the season. Like if you like last year, think about Cordorelle Patterson. He probably wasn't drafted in a ton of leagues. You had a good first game, $3 million. If you're sitting up there against the cap, you can't really get him unless you get rid of somebody. And who do you want to get rid of after the first week? Maybe you have somebody, maybe you don't. Whereas if you have some salary cap room, you could add Cordorelle Patterson. Hey, maybe he'll be good for the year. I mean, turned out he was.
Yeah, fantastic. That was big. That might be the biggest shocker I think I've seen in fantasy football. I mean, James Robinson was a big one, but everybody kind of expected him to get the workload. Cordorelle Patterson just can't. That was supposed to be Mike Davis. It was weird how that happened.
And ironically, Davis was the guy the year before, if you think about it, because when Christian McCaffrey went out, Davis was like $3 million or so. And I don't think most people thought he was going to be the guy. And then he turned out to be the guy. And he saved Davis 2 years ago, saved one of my teams because I picked him up and he rode him for most of the season when he was with Carolina. It didn't help when he was on the Falcons last year because he was terrible. But, hey, that happens.
Yep.
It happens in regular leagues and dynasty leagues too. So basically, if you want to check out, you learn how to rebuild. If you don't know how to set up your team, I have a bunch of articles from last year that goes over sort of like what the winning teams did and how they spent their money and how much of the cap they used and where they drafted players. There's all sorts of things that you can find on the Dynasty Owner website if you're getting ready to start your first team, or even if you're drafting another team. If you're already a dynasty owner, you're going to do a startup draft. So, but we'll get back. We'll talk about that. But Jay was talking about rebuilding, and one of the things we want to talk about is how you can go about rebuilding your team. And one thing that we're going to do is, I've got a team that I started in Dynasty, the first year of the Dynasty Owner in 2020. And I made a couple of bad draft picks. I drafted Patrick Mahomes. His contract was only $4 million. Then I also drafted Michael Thomas and Kenny Golladay as my sort of cornerstone wide receivers to go along with them. And then I had Devin Singletary as kind of my running back because his salary is under $1 million. Well, Patrick Mahomes' salary went up from $4 million to $45 million. Michael Thomas barely played the last 2 years, and I amnestied him. Kenny Golladay went from like $800,000 to $18 million, so I got rid of him. And Devin Singletary, until the last part of the last year, didn't do enough to warrant starting. So that team, surprisingly, believe it or not, with those first four picks, I'm rebuilding on that team. So, and Jay's going to give me a hand on how to do that. We're going to talk about that. But Jay does a lot of rebuilding. He does a lot of that stuff. So he needs to, before we get into my team, he needs to go over basically like the basics of how to rebuild, and then we'll talk sort of more about my team in particular. And then what we'll try to do on this, I think, in the next couple of weeks is sort of every week we'll give a little update on how I'm doing. Have I been following Jay's advice? Have I been not? Have I made offers and people have told me I'm crazy? Or have I got a few offers accepted? And what's going on with my team, so you can see if I'm doing anything to make myself better or not with Jay's help.
First off, if people aren't telling you you're crazy when you're trying to trade, you're doing it wrong. So that's a good sign. No, as far as trying to like summarize rebuilding, on Dynasty Owner, the best thing I can say is find your quarterback first. That's the hardest position to find. I know it's going to get expensive after a while, but that's why you find them first. If you can find them first, the rest of your team should kind of be on their rookie deals, and you got your 3 to 4 year window on their contracts. After you get your quarterback, you start looking for your tight end. And that's because the tight ends take a while to kind of develop. I know we've seen Kyle Pitts last year, and maybe that's a changing in how things are working in terms of the tight end position, but I don't think so. I think he was just an outlier. Your tight ends typically take 2 to 3 years to kind of develop. Same with your quarterbacks. I know, Justin Herbert and all that, but if you look at Josh Allen, it really took him 3 to 4 years to find his true self, and that's usually how it takes in the NFL as far as tight ends and quarterbacks. So I like to get those two out of the way, find them positions, make sure I have a nice core at those two positions, and then I start looking for receivers. And once you have your receivers, and you have maybe a top 10, top 12 receiver, at least one or two of those on your roster, then you go out and either make your trades for your running backs or start drafting running backs, because let's face it, running backs don't last long in the NFL. And if you start at the running back position, they're likely going to be on their last 2 years when the rest of your team's ready to win. So I try to fill that position in last.
Okay. Any other rebuilding tips? Like, how do you, for example, like, I don't like to rebuild. I was despising having to rebuild this team. I don't like to do that. I want to win. I want to win now. I don't like losing. Even if I'm rebuilding, I'm going to try to win every game. I mean, this team that I have, I finished in 11th place, and I was trying to win the losers bracket, and I tried to win every week because I just hate losing. So for somebody like me, I had to have somebody tell me this team needs to be rebuilt, because I wouldn't have done it on my own. So if you've got a team and you miss the playoffs, you're not doing so great, how do you know when it's time to rebuild? What are the signs? What are the things you look for?
So my main thing with that is I try to stay away from the middle of my league, the middle of the standings, as much as possible. You either want to be dead last or first place, basically, in my opinion. That's the way I look at it, because if you're not winning, what's the point?
Okay, thanks, Ricky Bobby.
If you're not taking first place, what is the point, honestly? You're not, obviously, if you're in a cash league, yeah, you get your second, third place prize pool, but you want to be a champion, let's face it. So unless you feel you're one of the clear-cut top 2 or 3 teams, I'm rebuilding right away. That's just how I do it. It's what I feel is the best way to do it. Otherwise, you're stuck with the 4th or 5th draft pick every year and just holding on to making the playoffs and hoping you get a lucky run. I don't like leaving it up to luck. I'd rather just have a dominant roster and leave it up to that. But that's kind of my rule of thumb with it. If you feel like you're outside of the top 3, it's time to rebuild.
Okay. Yeah. So, because there's always the stories. Dynasty Order has the 16 playoffs, and every league, there's always this thing. There's always the one team that finished in 6 or crawled into the playoffs, or, they barely made it, and then they knock off the 1 seed somehow. And pretty soon they're they're your league champion, and everybody else in the league is going, how did they win?
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Honestly, didn't I beat that team twice in the regular season, and all of a sudden they beat me in the playoffs, and I'm in 3rd and they're in 1st? This is crazy. But so Jay doesn't really like to do that. He doesn't want to be your 4th place team, apparently, or 5th and squeak into the playoffs. See, I'm kind of the opposite. I'd rather try my ass off try my butt off to make it into the playoffs, and then hope and pray that I'd like to have luck take over at that point and let me win. So, but sometimes it doesn't work out. This team was clearly, that we're going to talk about here, was clearly not built was not built very well. The Michael Thomas was a major misstep. And you think about if you're in regular dynasty leagues, if you're in dynasty, you probably what I'm talking about. He's $19.25 million. He didn't play at all last year. The year before that, he played a couple of games here. He played a couple of games, but wasn't great, and then got hurt. And now he's fighting with the Saints, and it's just a disaster. It was a disaster of a pick, and it's $19.25 million. In terms of the salary cap, that's like 10-15% of my cap for like a completely useless guy. And then the other pick that killed me was Kenny Golladay. He didn't do well this rookie season, so he didn't produce anything for me. And then the Giants inexplicably gave him a 4-year, $72 million deal, which I thought was crazy. And so I'm like, he didn't do anything for me at $800,000. Do I really think he's going to do all of a sudden with the Giants, with Daniel Jones throwing him passes, going to be like an $18 million wide receiver. So I got rid of him immediately. But if you think about it, those were like my 2 and 4 picks, my second and fourth picks that I got rid of it within 2 years. So I'm not surprising that I'm rebuilding this team. So, okay. So before we get into anything else you want to mention about like rebuilding, before we kind of talk about my personal team here for a few minutes.
Just trade your old running backs. Get rid of them. They're not going to be around when it's time to win if you rebuild them.
Okay. Well, so if you want, Jay wrote an article about this. So if you want to, we're not going to talk about the whole team here. We don't really have time. It'll kind of bore people. But if you want, there's an article called "Let's Rebuild This Team" a couple of weeks ago that Jay wrote. It's on dynastyowner.com. If you want to check out the whole team. But basically what Jay did was he grouped my team into five groups of players. And we'll talk about the first two. But basically the 5 groups are, you've got your, why don't you go over the 5 groups, Jay? You can talk about it better than I can.
They got building blocks, which are the players you're wanting to keep and build around. You know, that's your foundation of your roster. You got players you want to trade, players to hold, players to cut, and then your amnesty provision players. And most of those are all pretty self-explanatory. Like we talked about the amnesty provision earlier, that's somebody like Russell Wilson who goes down with an injury, or Michael Thomas, like Steve was saying. That's who falls into that category.
Okay. Fortunately, I didn't have any of those guys because I am to see Michael Thomas a while ago. And the other thing about Dynasty that we haven't talked about just before we get into this is that when a guy gets a new contract, you don't have to stick with that player. You actually have a time period where you're allowed to drop that player for free. Now, you can trade them away, get some value for them. But if you can't do it and you don't want them on your roster, you can just drop them for free. It's a 7-day window now. It's going to be expanded to probably a 30-day window. But that gives you a free out if like you get the Kenny Golladay contract where I didn't want him. I couldn't find a trade partner. Nobody gave me anything for him. So then I just dropped him and it didn't cost me anything, which is a good thing. So anytime a player gets a new contract, you can do that. You'll have a chance to drop them for free. But this team I have has a lot of free agents, but some of them I keep, some of them might not. But so the building blocks for my team, I actually have 4, which I guess isn't too bad. I think we talked about before, I have Patrick Mahomes on my team. So as Jay said, quarterback's the first position. I think I got that covered, even though he's $45 million. As the years go on, that's going to be less of a burden with the salary cap going up and more players getting similar contracts. That's going to be less of a burden. On the tight end front, I have Brevin Jordan, who Jay recommended as a building block. I think Twitter didn't really like that idea, but I'm happy with it. And part of the reason, and people who don't know already will learn this, I went to the University of Miami. I'm biased on University of Miami players for the most part. Sometimes they stink. But I do like Brevin Jordan a lot, which is actually why he's on this team. I tried to get him in a lot of places, but for Dynasty Owner purposes, Brevin Jordan's pretty darn good. I mean, his salary is under $1 million. I know he's not on the greatest team in the Texans, but I got Brevin Jordan for the next 3 years at $958,000 per year, which is pretty darn good. And I guess I know people disputed it, but my theory on it and why I would have him as a building block is because he could turn into a great tight end by the end of that contract, and I'm paying him less than $1 million. So he's worth hanging on to.
I loved the connection him and Davis Mills seemed to have. It once Davis Mills kind of took off, it seemed like Brevin Jordan was a big time player at that point. Not, he wasn't a huge tight end one or nothing, but he was putting up very respectable numbers as a rookie with Davis Mills. I just think as them two grow, you have trading him now. I think 2 years down the road, you'll probably look back and regret what you got for him if you trade him now. That's why I put him as a building block. I just think there's too much potential there to trade him for what you're going to get right now.
Yeah, and I'm not in my team. This team's probably not winning next year, so I still have 2 years of that great contract to build with when hopefully I'm winning and competing for that championship. And then the other 2 players are both wide receivers. One is Jerry Judy, and Judy has his contract's pretty respectable for dynasty owner purposes. It's about $3.8 million, and he's got 2 years left on that. And then I have Chase Claypool, who has got 2 years on his contract and is about $1.65 million a year. So, and actually, I traded for Claypool because I thought this team, when I got rid of Thomas and Galladay, I needed another wide receiver, so I traded a first-round pick for Chase Claypool. So I don't think I'm going to get that value back. So I actually like keeping him just because he cost me my first-round pick last year.
Yeah, so. And with Big Ben retiring, I don't see a lot of people clamor or chomping at the bit to go and try to get Chase Claypool right now. So same thing. Yeah, you got a couple year window here to rebuild. Definitely keep those guys. Jerry Judy, I might be a little biased on him. I have that dude everywhere. I'm a huge Judy truther for some reason. I don't know why. It's the route running got me back in his rookie or when we were scouting him and things like that. But yeah, definitely don't get rid of Claypool or Judy. I think those are two excellent receivers to build around as you go.
Okay, so I'm going to keep those guys. And then sort of what I wanted to talk about this week was sort of like, I would say the main players to trade. Jay had like a list. It's like a dozen guys he thinks I should trade. So that's a lot of trade offers. And this league isn't that active. So, but I think the main players I would say to trade from the list that you had there were Devin Singletary, because he's got 1 year left on his rookie contract, and that's just under $1 million, $974,500. I've got Chris Carson from Seattle, who has 1 year left. His deal is a lot higher. It's $5.2 million a year. I've got Mike Davis, who we chatted about earlier, at $2.75 million. And then I've got Hunter Henry from the Patriots, who has a $12.5 million contract for the next 2 years. But I got to assume, I'm assuming, I think Henry's worth something. And since if I'm going to keep Brevin Jordan, I don't really need Hunter Henry because he's going to cost $12.5 million. And by the time my team's good, he's going to be gone from the Patriots.
Yeah, and the tight end position's about to start getting expensive. I mean, you look at Dallas Goedert about to make $14 million. I believe Gesicki's due a new deal. Mark Andrews just got a raise. So the tight end position's about to get expensive. So Hunter Henry is, his salary, his salary is not looking all that bad anymore. I didn't care for it this past season, but now it fits right in with everybody else. So if you look for, maybe a bad contract to take back in return, I think you could get some very solid value out of Henry, especially taking some cap relief from somebody else. You might have to wait a little closer to the season after free agency ends to do that, but I definitely think you could pull off something like that, no problem.
Okay. All right. Well, so what I'm going to do, you can't see this because we're on here, but I'm going to share my screen so Jay can see the screen here and he can see my team. And we're going to kind of talk about some of the other teams in my league. I'm going to leave the names off, but I'm going to go to sort of some of the more active teams, and maybe Jay and I can just start talking about deals that he thinks I could possibly make, or at least start to offer and think about. So I'm just going to pick a couple. I looked at this a little bit earlier. I'm going to pick a team that I think who did really well last year in this league, but their running back situation doesn't look great to me. So I would think they might be a team who would want one of my three running backs. You can see they have AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones, Brandon Bolden, Devontae Booker, J.D. McKissick, James Conner, Latavius Murray, Michael Carter, and Myles Gaskin, and Xavier Jones as their running backs. So they've got a lot, but they don't have. I would personally say they don't have a ton of guys that they can keep. I mean, if they want to keep Conner, they're going to have to pay him. If they want to keep McKissick, they might have to pay him a little bit. Carter's a good building block, as is Dillon. Jones is expensive. So do you think I could move one? Do you think this team might take one of my running backs? And
yeah, I definitely do. It looks like they like to stockpile running backs by the amount they have there. And Yeah, definitely. Devin Singletary would probably be a good fit on this team if you could get him to pay the right price for him.
I
Um,
thought so. I thought so too when looking at it. So Jay and I are gonna look at the roster here. I had a couple of thoughts, but I want to hear your thoughts on players who maybe I could target. And what do you think in terms of Singletary? I mean, should I get a play? Should I get a good player? Should I get some picks, or should I maybe? This team has a late round picks in each round, or should I kind of take like? Do I find maybe a bad contract they have and offer to take that off their hands? And maybe get something as well. What are your thoughts?
for Singletary, it's really going to depend on how the person you're trading with feels on him, because I'm not very high on him, but I know a lot of people that are after the playoff run he just had. Well, end of the season and playoff run he just had, but I think I would lean picks. Maybe try to, you're not going to be able to trade Singletary for a first straight up, but maybe you can throw Singletary your third for a first, something along those lines. I don't know if you have any. I can't remember if you have anybody else's second round picks.
I do this league. I do not. I think I only have. I have to look at it. I think I have 2/3 actually in next year's draft. No, I have all my picks in next year's draft.
Okay,
So
and you're picking number 2. So yeah, you wouldn't want to throw the second round pick in there if he's picking towards the end of the first.
yeah,
But just try to, maybe remind them, hey, my third is basically a second, as it's the number 2 pick.
a late second, and your first is like
Basically
almost
an
the
early
last.
second, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you think it would be worth offering any of one of those other wide receivers like Carson or Davis, or do you think that they're more might not take those?
As far as Carson, I think I would wait and kind of, let his injury heal up and things like that. But I think the main thing there is going to see in what they do with Rashad Penny. I can't remember his contract situation. Do you know if he's a free agent or not?
He is. They declined.
Okay.
He had a contract. It was a little under $3 billion, and they declined the 5th-year option. So they have to. So he's a free agent.
Okay, so there I'm holding Chris Carson until you find out what happens with him. If Rashad Penny doesn't go back up to Seattle, that is a huge boost for Chris Carson, and I would trade him immediately at that point.
Okay. So what about this team? Do you think I'm looking at their tight end situation, and I'm seeing Blake Jarwin, Hosea, Tyler Higbee, and Zach Ertz, who's a free agent. Do you think this team might want? I think this team might want Hunter Henry. If
it's definitely possible, especially if Ertz gets a contract they don't like. I don't know what he's going to get paid. It's a weird situation. He struggled for so long in Philly and then started to come on a little bit in Arizona. So I'm not sure what he gets there, but definitely if they get rid of him or Higbee, yeah, they definitely will be play even without getting rid of both of those guys. If they get rid of one of the two, I think they're definitely a player for him.
Okay, so I mean, I would think that a player that. I think Blake Jarwin doesn't have a lot of value, but I mean, they could drop them. I could try to trade for Blake Jarwin and just kind of hang on to him. He's $5.5 million, which is a lot for a backup tight end.
Yeah, and he might end up being the starter again in Dallas. You never know.
No, that's
I don't
kind
see
of
him
the point.
keeping Schultz with the cap they're at and things like that. So, yeah, that's not a bad move at all, honestly.
Okay. I'm trying to see if there's any other play. Another player I thought maybe of targeting here, and I don't know what they think of the worth, is Devin Duvernay from Baltimore. His contract is only $1.1 million, and I know it's kind of far. I'm thinking about the only other guy is maybe Anthony Schwartz if they're kind of off him. His contract is $1.2 million, and it's 3 years. But I'm not sure they're willing to deal him. I'm just looking for players to target on this team.
Honestly, I think you could get Duvernay as kind of a throw-in on one of your deals that you're making. You know what I mean? You might have to attach another third or something to get him, but you could definitely easily have Duvernay or even Schwartz. Like as you said, it depends on how he feels on him, but you could definitely get one of those two guys as kind of a throw-in on a deal, in my opinion.
Okay. Okay, well that's one team that I thought might be interested in trading. Another team, and I guess I'm trying to keep this.
So it's Victor.
Yes, it is Victor. He's our Chase for the Ring champion. He joined this league. I don't think he's going to want anybody in a running back because he's pretty loaded there. He has Cam
Holy
Akers
cow.
and Henry and Elijah Mitchell and Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs. So and Kenneth Gainwell. Oh my God. So I mean, he definitely doesn't need another running back. But I mean, do you think his tight end situation? He's actually pretty good at tight end. He's got Hawkinson and Dallas Goedert and Foster Moreau. So he's not. I would think he's going to keep Hawkinson and drop Goedert.
Yeah, that would probably be the move I would make there too.
Yeah. So
you might be able to with if he doesn't drop Goedert, you might be able to get the Henry deal done by swapping them out if he ends up like if you have Henry in season and Goedert ends up struggling, that'd be a target for me.
Do you think there'd be any utility in trading Henry for Goedert and then just dropping Goedert when his contract kicks in?
If Victor's up for that, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Just because then you're not wasting an Amnesty Provision or Dynasty dollars if you end up wanting to, for some reason, cut Hunter Henry. You know what I mean? You're just getting ready to go to it for free at that point. And plus,
do you think I could get a? Do you think I could get a pick or anything out of that too? Maybe a third.
I don't see why not. Yeah, because you're if he's wanting to keep two tight ends like that, you're saving him a couple $1,000,000 there. Yeah, I don't see why not. You could even probably put your third in there and ask for a second as a starting point and kind of go from there.
Okay. Yeah, that's not much of an upgrade. He's got the 11th pick, so I mean, my third for his second is only like moving up 3 picks. But I guess it's better than not moving up 3 picks, right?
Or maybe you might even be able to, if that's the case, you might even be able to pull that off for a first and a second if he's only moving back a couple slots.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that's okay. So you think that's a way to go about this. Okay. And then the last team, we'll look at Tim's team here and see if we think there's anything I could do for a deal with Tim. I think he was pretty good in this league. He's speaking of Rashad Penny. He's got him. He's got Travis Etienne. He's got McCaffrey and Chuba Hubbard. So he's okay at running back. Wondering what his tight end situation. He's actually very well set here at tight end. Wow, this is a good tight end room. Dawson Knox, Mark Andrews, and Pat Freiermuth.
Oh wow, yeah, it is. Good job, Tim.
That's very solid. So. Okay. When he needs help is quarterback. His quarterbacks are Justin Fields, Taylor Heineke, and Ian Book in the league. But I don't really have much in a way of a quarterback to offer him unless he really wants like expiring Teddy Bridgewater contract, or take on a Taysom Hill, because we do know what Taysom Hill's contract is going to be. I have him and he's $12 million. But his contract will be next year, even though he's got a weird contract for dynasty owner purposes. It's going to be $10 million a year for 4 years. So, if you think he might be the quarterback, he could trade for him. I'm not sure if I'd add that, but I guess I could try that.
Also, if I'm you, I'm trading Mason Rudolph now. Like I'd trade him yesterday. With the news that's coming out, it's got to be just a vote of confidence for him. They keep coming out saying we're comfortable with him as a starter. No, we're not. There's no possible way any team's comfortable with Mason Rudolph as a starter. He's been in the league long enough. You know what he is. But, yeah, as far as that, he's not going to be a long-term starter. So if you can get a second or third round pick out of him, I'd do it right away.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll throw him on the trade block and see what happens here. Okay. Well, that's a good start. So what I think we'll do is first I'll stop sharing this because it's sure it's annoying to have to do that, but even though people can't see it, I was sharing my screen so Jay could see my team while looking at the other team, so I didn't have to tell him all the players we had. It made it a little bit easier for us.
Yeah, it did.
So I think what we'll do is I'll start making a couple of deals. I'll start making a couple of trade offers, throw some guys on the block, put some notes out there, see if anybody bites on anything. And then we'll kind of just keep reporting every week. I'll tell you if I've got any offers. Maybe if I get an offer, I'll hold on to the offer until we talk. And then you can tell me, oh my God, why didn't you take that trade already? God, Steve, what are you doing, man? Or, you tell me, we'll see what we think about that. So, okay. Well, good. Well, that was fun. I think the next thing we want to talk about sort of at the end, we're going to try to wrap up in a few minutes. One of us turns into a pumpkin in a few minutes in terms of picking up children from school. Is I wanted to talk about some of the top free agents, because obviously that's the big thing going on right now. And while players can't sign, there's indications of what's going to go on. And in terms of dynasty owner, one of the things is you've got to start. What we do is I look at Spot Track's market values. I mean, they're not going to be the exact contract they're going to get, but it gives you an indication. And then you can look at sort of like their current dynasty owner salary, what they think they're going to get. And then what I like to do is, and when I talk about these contracts, is I sort of look at like, okay, do I hold them, trade them, just drop them with the free drop when they get the new contract? And so some of mine are in my articles, but if you haven't read those, we can go over some of these players. And then what I'd also like to talk with Jay about is whether he thinks they're going to re-sign with their current team, or whether they're going to go to a new team. So we'll kind of skip around here. I want to kind of do a couple of players. The first guy we're going to talk about is a guy we went over earlier, is Cordorelle Patterson, because he finished as dynasty owner rules are a little bit different. We have some bonus points and things like there's bonus points for clutch scoring and some other bonuses. But overall in our scoring system, he was the running back 8 last season. He's 30. His salary last year was $3 million. And Spot Track is anticipating his market value at $9.1 million a year. So what do you think, Jay? You holding, trading, dropping Cordorelle Patterson? And do you think he sticks around in Atlanta or goes somewhere else?
As far as holding and trading, depends on your roster setup. If you're competing, I'm holding them. If you're rebuilding, I'm trading them. I see him staying in Atlanta. He had the most success he's ever had by far in his career last year, and he's been on 4 different teams, if I remember correctly, maybe even 5.
At least, Minnesota, New England, Bears, and he may have been somewhere else too.
So 4 or 5 teams throughout his career, and you finally find success. I think you stay there. It just kind of what my brain's telling me. It would make sense. Obviously, if he gets a massive contract somewhere, he's got to go with the money. But I just feel like as long as the money's there and Atlanta wants him back, he's going back.
Okay, I agree with you. I think he's going to re-sign with Atlanta. I think that's a smart move, and I think I hold on to him and see what happens. I'm not sure he's going to be totally worth that kind of contract. I really don't think he's going to get that contract. I think that's a lot personally.
Yeah.
But I would kind of hold on to him because I do think he has value if he's on the Falcons. Now, if he's not on the Falcons, if somehow he takes some other deal, I'd see if I could get a bag of donuts for him and just get rid of him. Honestly, I agree with you. I just don't see the value of another team. Is another team? I mean, I know there's some innovative offenses out there. Think of Mike McDaniel, how he used Deebo Samuel, which is similar, Cordorelle Patterson. But I mean, unless he goes to one of those innovative offenses, and I just feel like it's a risk. I think you're right. I think he has his most value in Atlanta, and the only way I would even think about keeping him is if he stayed there.
The only other real place I'd like to see him go would be Arizona, if they got rid of both Connor and Edmonds.
Okay,
I think that'd be a great fit in Arizona, but outside of Arizona, I just don't see it happening for him.
Okay, well we'll talk about Edmonds. We'll pick him since both you mentioned Connor and Edmonds, both of them are free agents. So Chase Edmonds was the running back 33 in Dynasty owner. He's 25. He had a great contract. He was $728,000 last year, but Spot Track's estimating his market value at $5.27 million a year. Forget what length contract they're saying he's going to get, but probably like a 3 or 4 year deal, I would think. So what do you think? What are you doing with Chase Edmonds, and what do you think is going to happen? New team or re-sign?
the Texans are going to sign him. No, I'm just kidding. They like re-signing older running backs, it seems like, after
He's
last year.
25. He's not an older running
Oh,
back.
wow. I thought he was like 28 for some reason.
No, Chase Edmonds is 25. So
That's right. He just came off his rookie deal, didn't he?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see him staying in Arizona, honestly. I just think we're going to see a little bit of a different approach out of Arizona, especially offensively this year after the early exit in the playoffs and all the drama we've seen this offseason. I see Connor going back there, but I don't think Edmonds will be.
Okay. And what are you going to do? If Chase Edmonds does get that kind of contract, 5.27 million, and you had him in Dynasty owner, that would be an extra $4.5 million a year. What do you think you'd do with them? What do you recommend people do with them?
I mean, you probably are still keeping him just to see what he does at that point, but it's probably just a flat out hold. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of value out of a trade from him or anything like that.
Okay, I'm a little bit different. I think I think he's going to go somewhere else. I agree with you on that. I'm not sure. They never really. I feel like they never really like invested in him as their back, so I don't think they're going to like give him $5 million a year. And I just don't see where he's ever. They've never trusted him. He's never been the guy. I mean, maybe he goes somewhere else and he's the guy and does great, but I don't know. 5.2 million seems like a lot of money to me. So I'd probably be trying to get rid of him. I think you get more than you get for Cordorelle Patterson if you go somewhere else, just because he's a lot younger. But I think I'd trade and move on from him and spend that money somewhere else personally.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you there. But...
Okay. Well, let's talk about Connor. You mentioned him. So he's only 26. You know that because you're a Steeler fan. He was the running back 6 last year, which probably chaps your hide a little bit, honestly. And he only made $1.75 million. And he's supposed to, his market value is about $6 million. I think it was a 2-year, $12 million deal they're talking about for him. So what are you going to do? You keeping him, holding him? And do you think he resigns with Arizona? You said he resigns with Arizona. You don't think the Steelers are going to get him back?
No, it didn't bother me actually. I liked seeing the success for him just because Najee did so well with Pittsburgh. If we didn't have Najee, yeah, it would have sucked. But yeah, I see him staying in Arizona. He was a beautiful fit out there. I think he fits well with the offense. I think they'll draft another younger kind of Chase Edmonds type running back to give him a little bit of a breather here and there. And I think they kind of just stick with Connor and maybe. I don't see AJ Green or nobody like that being back, but something about that offense will be a lot different. I don't have a finger on what it is yet.
Okay, I think I agree with you on keeping him. Even at $6 million, I kind of like that value. Now, if I had him though, I wouldn't be expecting him to be the 6th ranked running back because he had so many touchdowns last year that it was crazy. But even if I think I did something, even if he had like half of the touchdowns, he still would have been like a top 25 running back. So, that's not too bad. I mean, in 6 million 2 years, he's only 26. I definitely think he's a keeper, unless somebody like just blew me away with a trade offer. Then he's not like that untradeable. But and I had a question mark in terms of like whether he resigns or not. But you've talking about it's kind of talked me into thinking that he might stay there. I think you're right, because especially they need a running back. I mean, they basically have nobody at the running back position now because they're free agents. So,
yeah, and like I said, he was a good fit. I don't see Chase Edmonds being a 3-down guy as to where Connor can. So I don't see him paying both of them either. So one of them's staying, one of them's going. I just think it's Connor at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you said, they've got nobody to replace either one of those guys with, so they got to keep one.
Yeah. Or they got to go find somebody else to
get,
which has its own problems. Okay, so I'm gonna bump. Let's talk about the big free agent here. Obviously, Davonte Adams. So he was wide receiver 2 last year. He's 29. His salary, as we've talked about earlier, was $14.5 million last year. The anticipated contract from SpotTrack, his market value is $25.8 million. It's around a 5-year, $129 million contract that they're throwing around for him. He could get franchise tag though, and if he does, I think his franchise tag is talked about this with Tim on the live stream. I think it's $20.12 million, if I remember seeing it correctly. So that's an option, but let's talk more if he if he gets a bigger contract. I mean, I think almost everybody, if he gets a franchise tag, you keep him in because you're only paying $5 million more a year. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer because it's only one year. You're not on the hook for much and everything. But say he gets a 5-year, $129 million contract. What are you going to do with him? And do you think he gets that in Green Bay or gets that somewhere else?
I seen a report last night that Green Bay is prepared to let him test free agency, and it blew my mind. I didn't think that would ever happen.
I agree. I'm shocked.
I figured he would get tagged and then they would work on a long-term contract after that. But if that's the case, yeah, he's going to get exactly what you're saying if they let him test free agency. I mean, either way, he's probably going to get what you're saying. But that's a lot of money, especially for a 29-year-old receiver. If you're contending, you have to keep him. You can't get rid of him. But I think the best route to go would probably be keep him this year and then trade him after that if you can. But yeah, I don't think anybody's getting rid of Davonte Adams. Just he's too good. Even without Aaron Rodgers, I still think he puts up probably top 7 numbers, no problem. Outside of falling with just a nobody at QB, then obviously he'll struggle a bit. But if he gets a relatively good QB, he'll be a top 7 wide receiver.
Well, the one thing that I agree with the re-signing, I think I think it's crazy if he doesn't re-sign with Green Bay. I mean, They have all their receivers are basically free agents right now. I mean, is he going to? I think him and Rodgers are going to come back for the last dance. They had last dance last year, and now it's the last dance. But I just think personally, maybe I'm crazy on this, but I just think that's like $11 million more a year in Dynasty earner. I would be worried about his later years, and not because of his age, but because of not having Rodgers. Like, if he stays with Green Bay and him and Rodgers play one more year, and then Rodgers leaves or retires, what does he do? Is he have a rapport with Jordan Love? Does he, is he getting 10 targets a game? He gets 10 targets a game with Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers throws to him all the frickin' time.
Religiously, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not even matchup dependent, or he always throws to him. So I mean, I'm just worried that once, like you said, maybe you get that year out of him, but then what do you do after that? I guess you could amnesty him if you don't like what happens, but I don't know. I personally, if I had him, I don't have him in any leagues, but I might just trade him and just get a ton. I mean, just parlay that ton of picks and everything for, get a ton of stuff for him.
Yeah, definitely. Now that you say that, definitely test the waters out on Davonte Adams in terms of trading. See what people are offering for him. If you get a very good deal at $11 more a year or $11 million more a year, yeah, go ahead and do it. Now that you're putting it that way, yes. But I don't know that anybody's going to give you a ton for him with the question marks around them right now. With now, if they re-sign, that's a whole different story. Once both of them are locked up in Green Bay, that's a whole different story. But as of right now, it's a little weird out there. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm very excited to see what happens there.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right, and so I think the last one we're going to talk about, we'll stick with Green Bay because I guess we kind of had an Arizona Green Bay focus. I wasn't intending that, but well, whatever. Is Robert Tanya. So he's a free agent. He got injured last year. He finished as a tight end 51, but that's hurt. That's hurt by the fact that I think he missed over half the season. He's only 27. Last year he played on like one of those tender offers, which was like 3.384 million. SpotTrack has his market value at $10.8 million a year. So, I mean, what are you doing with him, and what do you think? Is he in Green Bay again or out?
No, I don't think he's in Green Bay again. If I remember right, they're 20 million over the cap or something like that, 28 million.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see him keeping him, especially when they got Rodgers and Adams to worry about. And then I believe like Rashawn Gary or something on the defensive line needs re-signed, and he's looking at like $20 million or something like that. If I remember, I think you and Tim talked about that yesterday.
We did, yeah. I forget who it is, but somebody else is getting paid on that team.
So It makes no sense to keep him. I mean, yes, he had a decent rapport with Rodgers, but he's coming off a big injury, looking at $10 million a year when DeGora looked okay at the end of the year, honestly. So I just don't see it happening.
And what would you, if he's your tight end and he's going to make $10.8 million next year, what are you doing with him in Dynasty Owner?
I'm trading him. I traded Dallas Goedert the last week of the season, this past season, and got a first out of him somehow. So yeah, I'm definitely trading him.
That was after he signed that contract too. He's making 14.3 next year. Good for you.
Yep. Yeah, as soon as I seen that, I put him out there, and it was almost instantly the guy accepted. So I don't think he had seen the extension just yet, but I'll take it.
Yeah, hey, that's good. That's paying attention sometimes gets you a little bit more. So yeah, I'm with you on all of that. I think Green Bay doesn't have the resources to re-sign him. He's a luxury for them. I mean, they have to get Rodgers and Adams settled, and then everybody else kind of falls from there. But if somebody's throwing Robert Tanya $10.8 million a year, and they still haven't signed Rodgers and Davonte Adams, he's gonna go. I mean, God. So, and I agree with you. I have him in one league, and so I'm going to try to trade him because I think I want just anything I can get for him because I don't think he's worth $10.8 million. I don't think he's worth $10.8 million a year. I don't really want him at that amount. And if it's I would be able to. The good part is if you try to trade him and you can't get anything for him and he just keeps hanging on your team, you can get rid of him for free. Because that is a new contract. So, at the end of the 30-day period, if I've still got him sitting on my roster, he's going to be on the free agent auction. So cool.
Yeah, don't blame me there.
All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. Like I said, I got to go pick up a child. So at school, 8-year-olds aren't happy when you leave them at school.
No, not at all.
Not at all. So this was fun. We're going to try to do this again next week. But both Jay and I do articles. I do articles on Mondays. They'll come out on Mondays on Dynasty Owner, www.dynastyowner.com. Also on Twitter at Dynasty_owner. And so this week, I've been doing a series on a lot of these free agents and their market values and what I would do with them. And so I've done running backs, wide receivers, and now I'm going to get into the tight ends. I'm going to get into the sort of the high value, the high salary tight ends. Those are guys who are likely to get like 10 million or more a year. I think it's 8 million or more a year as like the limit. There's about 10 tight ends with market values on Spot Track. So I'm going to divide it in half and do the high salary guys first and then the lower salary guys next. But I've also done running backs, wide receivers. So check those out if you want. Not any quarterbacks because there's really no good free agent quarterbacks. So that's going to be coming up for Monday. And then you have an article your articles drop on Tuesdays usually, Jay, right?
Yep. Yeah. This week I'm doing creative rebuilding trades, which is trades that our users have already made that are rebuilding. And the following week, I am going to tell you guys how to avoid a rebuild with one of my buddy Eli's championship teams. He didn't win. He was in the championship game, but I'm going to give him some pointers on how to avoid a rebuild with that team.
Oh, okay. Very good. Yeah. Eli, he won a contest for us too, didn't he?
Yeah. Yep.
He did. That's right. Yeah, he was one. I forget which contest he won, but he won one of the contests and got a good prize. He was very happy about it, if I remember.
Yeah, he got a shirt and a hat, if I remember right.
Oh, that's not bad. Not bad for. I think he got the guessing when we did the Amnesty. How many people would release Michael Thomas and Odell Beckham? I think he won one of those. So good. Yeah, that's good. Good deal. So so you can catch Jay on Tuesdays on DynastyOwner.com. And what's your Twitter handle again, Jay?
At JPoundsNFL.
Okay, and I'm at StevieT33. Thanks for listening. Jay said that if you're on Spotify, what's the Spotify thing about?
There's a rating system on Spotify. If you guys would just go on there and give us whatever you feel we deserve, we definitely appreciate it, and it'll help us kind of push up to the top of the charts on Spotify if we get enough ratings. Just type in Dynasty Owner, you'll see it right under our logo.
Great. And then if you're listening on Apple, if there's like buttons or anything like that, please do so. Put in comments. We always try to respond to those. Check our articles out. Follow us on Twitter. And thanks for joining with us. This was fun, Jay. We'll try to start doing it again next week.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good one, guys.